All right. Are we good? Can you hear me? Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining our session today. Can you all hear me all right? Yeah? Great. So my name is Michael Hoch. I am the program director for the AI Executives Council. How many people here are on councils here at Conference Board? Couple, few? For those of you who don't know, the councils are a peer-to-peer networking group, cross-functional, designed around particular functions. And we've just launched, literally this week, a council for AI executives. These are for strategic leaders within organizations who are leading AI transformation, AI implementation. If your company has a leader who is doing that, come talk to me. I'll be at the TCB booth at the end of the day, or find me around here. But we just launched it. We've got 16 members, banking, manufacturing, healthcare. It's a really great place to start to learn and grow, especially in this very fast-moving place. With me, I have Anand Logani. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name is Anand Logani. I've been with EXL. We are traded on NASDAQ, so it's EXLS if you want to look up the firm. My title is Chief Digital Officer, but I spoke to my CEO and I said, I sound old school now. You have to add AI to my title. So we are working on that. I bet you that I'm going to be a little provocative, but I think that's my job.
It definitely is. If you're not productive, we're not going to like it.
Yeah.
So today we're talking, it says banking and AI, but we're really focusing on customer experience. How many folks here are in the customer experience space? 1, 2, 3. How many people have call centers in your organizations? Hopefully a lot. Call centers, help desks. So all of those are related to each other. And I've been at the Conference Board since March. I was actually at Google for the previous 7, 8 years working in the cloud AI space, focused on call centers, customer experience. So that's the context I'm going to bring to this primarily. And if you've been in the space or if you've worked in the space, we really, up until Gen AI and LLMs came out, we focused in 3 areas. We focused on automating, voice bots, chat bots. How do you automate call flows? How do you do it so that a person doesn't need to talk to an agent unless they want to? We worked on augmentation. How do we help agents do their job better? And we worked on analytics. What's actually happening within the call center? How long are the call flows and so on? And you can bring AI to all 3 of those areas. And we had AI that we were using and customers were using in all 3 of those areas. A good example in the banking sector in particular is Wells Fargo. They built an agent called Fargo. It handles millions of interactions a month. And it's built on Google technology, a chatbot that actually leads to a voice interaction and service. That's how you automated call flows and you automated customer experience. Now, with the advent of Gen AI and LLMs and all of these things, it's sort of turned the whole customer experience segment on its head. And I'm not going to steal his thunder. So Anand, why don't you talk about what you're seeing now and how that advent of Gen AI and LLMs has really impacted the customer experience segment?
Sure. Thank you. And I'm just going to use a lot of customer examples to bring points home. And this is like real work that's happening and being deploying, because there's a lot of theory out there, but I'm sure you can read that on ChatGPT. You don't need me for that. I think the first thing I will say is that the way to think about this is that the definition of the work, the workflow, and the workplace is going to fundamentally change. When you think about the work, it's actually 2 categories. You're going to find people either working on AI or people working with AI. So that's going to fundamentally change the dynamics of the work. If you look at the workflow, historically, you look at banking, financial services, insurance, or any of these regulated industries, everything was designed based on, okay, I want to do this upfront task like a triage. I want to give this downstream task to somebody who's more smarter. I have to, and it just depends on how much knowledge you possess. You got the work in that fashion. Now what's going to happen is that you can actually completely move the knowledge upstream. You can put some of these large language models and agents together. So the workflow is going to get completely disrupted. There's no reason to design the workflow the way it was done in the past. And number three, be prepared. Now you can put a number 27 or 2030. That's we can all pick a year, but your workplace will have agents and humans. The collaboration is not going to go away. The human-machine collaborations is going to be at the best ever, but that's the reality of what's going to happen to the workplace tomorrow. So let's just put this in context of how some customers are thinking about it. And this is the actual use case. One of our customers, this is large consumer bank. You all know the name, actually one of the largest. And they have these 60 million calls and couple of intents. For example, lost cards and last transaction. One of the most common reasons as to why customers call the bank. 60 million such calls, and of those, 15 million of these two types of transactions. All the intent models, traditionally with conversational AI, took you 2 to 3 years to build, because you would put the call flow in a conversational AI engine. With large language models, just in 11 weeks, all those 110 intents are much stronger, more accurate, and more contextual. So that's sort of crunching the timeline significantly. Number two, now we have put the agentic workflow and agents, and with that, we are actually expecting a significant portion of those calls to be as much as possible autonomous. Now, we're being careful. You saw me 240 million to 60 million to 15 million. We are not solving all 240 today. But at least those 13 to 14 million calls, some initial dipstick are already performing at 97% accuracy. With LLMs, we could only get to 93. With the agentic workflows, it's at 97%. And we'll get a little bit deeper into it, but that's just one example. Big lesson to take away. Don't think about implementing AI, Gen AI, agents, digital twins, accelerated computing. Think about reimagination, the big problems you're solving, and the value you are creating. If that's the true North Star, things will fall in place. Otherwise, the cost overruns and the complexity of it, 50% of these fail, and that will continue to happen. So that's kind of my perspective, and we'll share some more examples as we go along, but this is a real use case, and this is actually going to go live. Initial dipstick, I already shared with you, the results are quite impressive.
And in the customer experience space, what you're trying to do is get the customer service where the customer wants it, not where you want them to go. This is a fundamental change that happened in the last 5 years or so, because before we have these technologies available, it's like, I have a call center, I need the customer to call this 1-800 number, I need the customer to navigate the tree that I set up, or I need them to find it somewhere on the website. Hopefully I've given it somewhere where they can do it. We want the customer to say, like, I have a problem, I have a question, I want to reset my password, I want to check my balance. It doesn't matter if it's on the phone app, it might be a phone call, it might be chat on the website. How can you get the answer to them as quickly as possible? And the complexity that used to be there was you had to first think about what channel you're talking about, secondly, think about what number of systems you were talking through and to, and then do all of the programming and testing and quality in order to make it work. With with this agentic approach and with LLMs, you can tell the system, we want to be able to answer this question, whether it comes in through chat, whether it comes in through voice or the website. We want it to give this answer from this knowledge repository. Now, give me an agent that does that. And then have the agent plug into these systems. I'm making it very simplistic, but it does take it down from multiple months and potentially multiple years to weeks in terms of how you program these agents. The best example I have, the biggest example I have, is we were working with a telco outside of banking, but telco, a lot of banks have similar size call centers. They had 40,000 agents taking hundreds of millions of calls a year. But their biggest problem was, how do you do the second step? Somebody calls 1-800 telco and says, what? They had 18,000 potential intents, first step intents, 18,000. You said 170? 18,000 potential intents. How do you map that? How do you understand where possibly these things can go? It took us almost 2 years to do the big data mapping. We had some special tools. We needed hundreds of thousands of calls. We sat through quality sessions. We were able to map out this session and then start programming our agents to respond to 18,000 intents. Once Gen AI came out with the Gen AI and the LLM models and this agentic approach, that team said, well, I wonder how long it would take us to do that same project today. It took them less than 90 days. 2 years down to 90 days to program 18,000 intents. So the customer experience used to be very difficult and complex and would come up with somewhat of a rocky delivery. Now you can have a very consistent experience for the customer. Are they coming in through chat, through voice, through whatever? You can have a very consistent answer to the customer, and it takes a lot less effort to do the programming and the quality review. So we talked about work state before and after. What about ROI? How does your customers look at ROI? Everybody wants to know, how do we demonstrate value with AI? I've said in the customer experience space, like, it's actually clearer than some other AI areas. Why don't you talk about that?
Yeah. So look, the reality is the amount of investment that's going into it and the returns that are coming out of it at the moment are definitely anemic. I mean, Sequoia Capital just did a report, $50 billion of investments in several companies in hardware, AI tooling, $3 million of revenue, right? So there's a significant value drift happening at the moment. People say we are deploying generative AI, and you ask them what you're doing, and they're saying, I'm putting Microsoft Copilot. I'm sorry, that by itself, you're not going to learn the whole true potential of generative AI. The value drift is happening on account of many reasons. First reason is it's about actually picking the right use case, and really an impactful problem that we all believe and the company believes is a problem to be solved. Now, there are definitely qualifying questions. Is it ready? Do we have the data? Can we do the tooling? I'm not suggesting that you don't need to do all of that. So first, let's look at impactful use case. Then let's look at the data quality and data availability. People say data is the new oil. I always advise my client, data is the new asbestos. Too much of data without thought is also of no value. In fact, it's going to cost you money. You're going to create more problems. So just don't go crazy collecting all kind of data. Yes, you need the infrastructure. You need to understand how data will be made available. But after the use case, you have to just go back and see what data is available and what would be needed. There is a lot of work on engineering. On an average, generative AI use cases to the companies are taking 8 months, not weeks. Why? Because I think Karen in the last panel mentioned, there's a lot of initial tooling. You're learning, what's my caching strategy? What's my prompt libraries? How am I going to access and create the scale? So you learn. It's okay to take time, but you're going to learn from it. Important is pick the right use case. One of the big reasons that these use cases have stopped is cost. Up to 500% of underestimation of cost, not 10, 20, 30, 40. So if your value is anemic and your cost overrun is so big and it's not strategic, what are you going to do? You're going to stop. And that's a big reason that why these things have stopped. And engineering has choices. Latency, how fast do I need the information? Cost, how accurate it has to be. If you're expecting something has to be 99.5% accurate, don't pick the use case. It's not there yet. So it's the choices of tooling, but start with the value, and that actually becomes really, really important in how sort of you think through this. And this also came up in the last part as to this evolves pretty fast. This changes pretty fast. You could put something today, it's going to fundamentally change tomorrow. So what do you do? One of the most important things for scaling is, in the past we used to call it machine learning ops. You need a LLM ops or an AI ops. So you will always track your latencies, you'll track your cost, you'll track your model outputs, and you'll learn from it, and you'll keep ingesting it back, the learning loop, because if you don't do that, you're going to have a problem over time because the cost overruns can happen, or you have a better mousetrap, and you're not taking advantage of it. So this is how I always think about value and why some of the value drift happens. At the end of the day, let me just take one example to just put this in context. I was with the chief claims officer of this insurance company, and they process these hospital indemnity claims. So somebody's going to a hospital, you bought a policy, and at the end of the day, you want to make sure you have the best experience, because that's the goddamn reason you bought the policy, that the day I have the claim, you'll be by my side helping me out. I start the conversation with her, and the conversation is, oh, we do triage, then we do adjudication, then I'm sending it to the fraudulent team, then it's the servicing team, then it's 4 kind of outbound calls. It takes me 30 days. And I want to think how generative AI can solve triage problem, how generative AI can solve this problem. And my question was, and I'm not an insurance expert, I said, why 30 days? Why do you have to take 30 days to settle a claim? Now, again, you're not going to overnight solve all problems. There is complexity and there is a spectrum. So now the design that we are thinking is, you hear about this agentic workflows, and again, agents is a very overused term, but there are levels of agents, from autonomous to something very simple, and then there is how you can configure these agentic workflows. So we are putting a triage agent, which will triage the case. There is an adjudication engine, because you have the logic from your classic machine learning models, and you will let the adjudication agent do the adjudication. There is going to be a fraud referral agent. That's a separate agent. We're going to create an eloquent workflow that will stitch these things together. I'm going to actually bring all the knowledge of those hospital indemnity claims right up front, and I want to do this damn thing in 3 hours. Now, that's the ambition. Not going to happen overnight. And now we are reimagining it for the customer. But efficiency is the byproduct. Trust me, you will get the efficiency if you're solving meaningful problems. So this is just stitching your agent workflows. The last thing I'll say here is, it's not just one trend in isolation. It's how these things are coming together. Agents have been there, but agents are now more powered with LLMs. Again, cost latency for triage, I'll use a simpler and a lower complex model. I will use a classification model. For something more complex, I'll use probably a more advanced 70 billion parameter model, because I need to bring advice, especially on the fraud. So now I can configure this in a way that's the most sensible thing for the outcome I'm trying to deliver. So it's all these things that are advancing at the same time, and they're advancing at a rapid pace, and how do you bring these together to solve a meaningful problem?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting example, because in the past, you might dig in on one particular step and say, I think we can solve the communication with the customer problem. All the other things we can't touch yet, because they're too complex, because the data is not available in a clean way, because the process itself has these 47 steps, and I don't even know what all 47 are. I think that as companies start to say, what's the top line value? And what story is the board being told and the CEO being told about what's the possibility of this? Imagine we could resolve a claim in 3 hours instead of 30 days. That's a good question to ask your CEO, to ask your board, for the CEO to ask the board when you're talking about funding and doing things differently. In order to do that, we need to think about the process as an incomplete experience for the customer, and then look at what we can do along the way. We've got a lot of new tools just in the last 2 years that can solve for the engagement model, just the chatbot part between the customer and the systems. Like you said, the 170 billion parameter model that's going to be needed for the adjudication process. And those are probably 2 extremes. You can do different ones in between. You can build those together, you can launch them, test them individually, but the goal being, we want to take our claims resolution from 30 days to 3 hours. Value for the customer, value for the company. I do want to comment on the time to value, because we're talking about a time example here. I get a lot of questions like, I deployed my generative AI bot and I thought I was going to get 20% savings, and I'm not seeing 20% savings. And then I ask, well, when did you do this? Well, we started in June, and I expected it by now. It's October. Why don't we have our 20% savings? Do you get those kinds of questions?
Yeah.
What do you say when they ask you that?
Yeah, look, I think that's one thing that we are also seeing so far. The anticipated benefit, let's say on the efficiency, is not hitting the mark yet. So for example, we just deploy this to Michael's earlier point, Smart Agent Assist, which is giving customer a channel of choice to first come and interact with us. If the portal and self-service can solve it, let it solve it. Next step, let an agent identify the intent, and if the response model can respond it, let's do it. If it comes to a human person, then you want the Smart Agent Assist to harness, leverage the knowledge corpus, and make you smarter. Another thing I will tell you in this, let the AI be a true collaborator and give you the nudge for the next best action. Don't rely excessively on prompting, because prompts have costs, and your people will change. So let the AI look at the intents, all the transcriptions that have happened, identify the patterns of what's happened before, and give you the nudge as to what the next best action is. And to that point, in this example, what happened is actually value efficiency saving, instead of 35%, is only up to 15 to 18. But what it started to happen was employees found it so much better, because we so much underplay the change management of it. You're now expecting that call center rep to now suddenly work with systems, nudges happening, prompts, and my world has now completely changed. So you have to take it slow and embrace change, but their life gets better. Inaccurate information to the customer went down by 70%. So at the back of it, the first call resolution went up, and they were not doing repeat calls, and that improved. And lastly, because 90% of these calls were get transcribed, and AI was giving you some insights from knowledge corpus, or you could ask the question and get the answer, what started to happen is you started to find trends, because 100% stuff is getting transcribed, everything's getting recognized with intents, and you're getting intelligence. So this retailer found out certain types of furniture is actually costing them more, has a lot more repetition. So value started to come out from something completely different. But yes, efficiency, all us suppliers and vendors will tell you tomorrow, oh my God, if you're not into AI agents and LLMs, world will collapse. You have to be there tomorrow. It is a journey. It is a journey. It's not going to change overnight. It's more backloaded than tomorrow. But I think it's important to start embracing it, because the value of it to reimagine for your employees, for your customers, for your stakeholders is far greater than just thinking about pure efficiency metric. I had 10 bodies, can I do it with 6 bodies?
Mm-hmm. I agree with that, and I think the time frame is important. Like setting expectations that this is a 1 to 2 year journey on an ROI, not a 3-month journey to ROI. Very important. I liked what you were saying about the agents being able to get more accurate information. I heard it earlier today in one of the sessions, I forget which one. We've talked about how AI can replace the mundane tasks, but this was called out earlier. It's something that I've seen time and again in the customer experience segment. It's like you can have your average agent act like a specialist, because you can now get the information to them that is specialist information at a quality that they need, right? So think of it that way as well, especially in customer experience. You've got a high turnover in all of these situations. You're constantly bringing in new people. Your runbooks are changing. Your products are changing. If you can turn your generalist into a specialist by having an AI agent help them, that gives you extreme value. And it gives the agents value, because they want to solve the problem. The high turnover is because they're frustrated that they can't do as good a job as they want, and people are upset. If they can actually solve the customer's problem, the agent satisfaction score goes up as well as the customer satisfaction score. So we've got a couple more minutes, and I want to leave time for question. I'm just going to ask recommendations on the customer experience. Where would you ask them, give them 1 or 2 points that they should take away from here in terms of getting started or thinking about their own customer experience?
Yeah, some of this may be a repetition, but I think the amazing thing is that several of these processes where you interact with the customers, the knowledge repositories are already there. So you have some data to work with. That's why it's a most used area and area that companies go after. I will maybe sound repetitive here, but I always say start with a good business problem, something that has enormous value. It will be complex, but so be it. Very quickly you can qualify if this is the right area where there is enormous value. So this example where I was telling you, $60 million benefit is there. So even if I overrun a little bit on cost, it's okay because there is tremendous value to be had. Second thing is, I think it's an amazing human-machine collaboration. In some instances, it'll become fully autonomous. I don't think it's going to become all fully autonomous. In some cases, it'll be a degree of autonomy or help from the AI, and in some cases, rest of it will be the human in the loop. As you've heard in the previous sessions, then working backwards on organizing your data. Trust me, tooling and engineering has a lot of choices. Take help, because you are going to not have a lot of talent pool yourself. That's where you can get help. And last but not the least, I mentioned it earlier, it is actually not everybody will be able to jump on that bandwagon and become an AI expert. You know, companies are trying to launch these training programs. So people will work on AI. So some of those folks will be, they're Python experts, they're the Python coders. For them, they were data scientists. For them, working on AI will be a natural evolution. Some of your other folks may not be able to pick this, but they will work with AI because several of our platforms, several of the technologies, several of the tools will start have AI embedded. So their workflow and their work will completely change. So you have to think about those both those workforces and think about both those spectrum of workforces as you work on this evolution journey.
Great. Thank you, Anand. So do we have any questions from the audience? We've got a few minutes. We answered all your questions on customer experience. I will say on the last point that you made, that the way that these technologies are being integrated is both within the tool sets that your workforce is already using, but also you heard from Microsoft earlier today, you heard from KPMG as well, like the low-code, no-code environment means that the business user, whether they're a call center agent or the manager of the call center, these folks can now start to build their own workflows, especially in the call center area. A lot of the tools that are out there are leaving IT, where it needs to be really configured and really highly tested, and you need Python experts, and moving over to business. Like for the last several years, we were working mainly with call center owners, and some of them were like, we want to avoid IT at all costs. Can you help us deploy a new customer experience flow? And the answer is in many times yes, because the tools have the intelligence within them. You no longer need as much of the IT experience. You should still work with them. Ideally, all of you are working together. Yeah. But you don't have to have them.
Half of these announcements that you're hearing, the products are not even 30% ready.
No.
They just rely on all of us in the ecosystem to keep working and innovate, right? These products are not more than 30% ready, if that. And I think this, why stitching this together becomes important is, LLMs used to only work on a task. With agentic workflows, you can actually work on a goal and a workflow. So difference. Two, LLMs did not have a very short memory. Here you can enable memory, learning, and feeding back into the loop. Number three, agents are far more open to integrations and APIs. That wasn't the model with LLMs. Lastly, I'm sure you hear these terms called knowledge graph. If there is dynamic data sets that's always evolving, agentic workflows are more powered. But it's not either or. It's the marriage of that with the human in the loop that's going to create the magic for you. So that's kind of my parting comments. I think we have a minute if anybody, please, a last question.
With the agentic approach, do you still have some concerns about hallucinations, or are those out of the picture?
Actually, that's a great question. The amazing thing is I am actually seeing hallucination coming down and accuracy going up. So with LLMs, we could only get as far as 93%, but that was very complex engineering, chunking, re-ranking, keep feeding back. Agentic workflows, because they had that memory component, learning component, data flows being fed back to learning, gradually I'm seeing accuracy movement happening. In some cases, like I said, early test, even up to 97%. I think it's still there, because the more you move into the complexity spectrum, the variations start to kick in, and that's where the human intelligence becomes important. But I have seen a 4-5% lift. In fact, that's one most important reason to marry LLMs and agentic workflows, because the combination actually increases your confidence. And the moment you're at 99%, you'll be comfortable leaving into the agent completely and call it autonomous. And that's why I call it a journey. When people ask me a question, what about autonomous agents and will we get there? I say, wrong question. The question is, how can I use it now to configure the right workflows, learn from it, and at some point I'll get there, but not tomorrow.
Great. Thank you all.
All right, we're on time.